Okay, let's see. Oh, frick, this is my least favorite part. Today on the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast, we cross-dress with three men pretending to be women. But are these movies just for hijinks, or do they have heart? With Some Like It Hot and Tootsie on the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast.
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all, never saw each other before. They swap murders. Criss Cross.
Well done! I'm sorry, well done! A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
You gotta keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide could bring?
Hello and welcome to the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast, where we crisscross cinema history to find connections you may have never recognized. Today's two films escape their cares by disguising their genders. But can we escape the deeper lesson in Tootsie and Some Like It Hot? Hi, I'm Aaron Wilson, writer, director, and comedy aficionado.
And I'm Mark Klobus, who is trying to get in touch with his inner woman, but she's not returning my calls.
And I'm Velia Moncada, actor.
And many other things.
And other things, yes.
Okay, today, just as always, we'll review our two films, and then we go crisscross to compare and contrast. But first, Mark, what media has caught your eye?
Well, I've been watching a lot since I was last on, but the one that stands out for me is I did catch Novocaine in the theaters.
Okay.
And the premise is that Jack Quaid's character plays an assistant bank manager who has a genetic condition, which means he doesn't feel pain. Mm-hmm. And he starts to date a teller at the bank, and that's Amber Midthunder's character. And they have great chemistry in this movie. And there's a bank robbery. She gets kidnapped, and he goes and saves her. And because of his condition, he's kind of like a superhero. Mm-hmm. So you get him, suffering all this. Incredible damage, and his reaction isn't, screaming, in undescribable agony. It's more like, oh, come on. It's the kind of film I honestly think Hollywood needs to make more of. These, low to mid budget films where they just have, half dozen good actors.
I think you're really right about the mid-budget movies. Like, they don't exist anymore. Like the Home Alones, even The Fugitive, like those kind of movies just aren't made anymore. And I kind of have that as a goal once I get to that point of being able to make a mid-budget movie, of like making those, because there's a market out there for it, I think, still, of like, if Home Alone were made today, not one of the crappy sequels, but Home Alone itself, I think people would eat it up. So
yeah,
I heard this interesting analysis that it has a lot to do with the ties nowadays between Hollywood and Wall Street, because they don't make, studio executives don't make a lot of waves when they talk about these mid-budget movies that aren't based on anybody's IP.
Yeah.
But you talk about, nine-figure, this is based upon this video game franchise, or, here's this comic book, we're going to go ahead, starring Chris Pratt and whatnot. And all of a sudden, that's what causes stock prices to go up and so forth, which kind of gets to probably a major factor in why Hollywood feels so broken nowadays.
yeah, it's all just giant movies now.
Yeah, and we're all concerned about the stock price of Warner and Disney and whatnot, and not actually about hey, let's take a chance on this movie like they did in, say, the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. I've been watching, the most recent thing that I watched is Rebel Moon on Netflix.
Okay, is that the Zack Snyder one?
I think so.
Yeah.
It is.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just watching that, and it was actually pretty interesting. The storyline isn't, I don't know, it's not boring. I don't know. It's, I want to say it intrigued me because it's really hard for me to really have like that. Like, I'm sorry, like Lord of the Rings was not my thing. And so I know I shouldn't probably compare it to that, but has a lot of like characters that are like extraterrestrial, and it was really cool to see all that stuff. I don't know. I liked it though. I'm still watching Modern Family because I'm
Oh, that one's great.
I pick on it, but I'm almost there. I'm on season 9. But yeah.
Is that 2 more seasons to go or 1 more season
I
to go?
think so. It's 1 more season. I think it's like there's 10 seasons or 11. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the comedy in that show kind of, when I was in kind of a bad mental place, it kind of intimidated me how good it was. Like there's an episode where she's like, I ordered a box of baby cheeses, and then and she wanted like little cheeses, and it came like a box of little baby Jesus statues.
I think I saw that episode. Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. They have a little. They're just witty. I don't know.
Yeah.
How about you, Aaron?
Yeah. So I've been watching, don't judge me, a bunch of true crime stuff. So I started out with Murder Among the Mormons. So I've got an interesting into that. I know the background of the history and stuff, and I mean, well, about him specifically. I didn't know much, but just like the culture and everything. But then I moved on from that to one called Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter, which was really interesting. If I were to say why it was interesting, it would be big spoilers. But that's about a daughter that the mom goes looking for her because she gave her up for adoption when she was 16. And she finds out that she died when she was 16, like the same age she was when she gave her up. And so that one was really interesting. Give that one a look. These are all on Netflix, by the way. And then there was American Murder, Gabby Petito. That one I'm going to get into a little more because it's so frustrating. Like the first episode, I almost stopped watching because she's just alone with this horrible guy that's treating her horribly, and you see exactly where it's going, and there's nobody there except the two of them, and you just feel helpless along with her. And it's like I can't watch this. And then the very end of that episode, she calls her ex-boyfriend for help. And she's like, I'm going to run, like trying to get, I guess, support for doing that and maybe somewhere to run to. I don't know. But anyway, so that one was interesting. Once you get past the first episode, it's...
I did watch the Gabby Petito case on Netflix. And yes, I agree. It was just like, what?
Yeah.
With the ending, like, just like the stuff with police officers too. Like, I totally get you.
Yeah,
just like,
there was one time they got pulled over, and they legitimately were interrogating her, thinking she was the abuser. And it's like, are you kidding me? Can you even, like, she's got the bruises and he's got some scratches on his eyes.
Yeah.
Even just from that, and the whole dynamic of it, she's the one bawling her eyes out in the passenger seat, and I don't know, it just, the ineptitude of the police officers at that point was
for that specific occasion. Yeah, it was definitely like, do you not see what that?
But then there's the detective that takes up the case later on when she's already dead, unfortunately, but who is much better at her job.
You're supposed to make your spoiler announcement before you reveal details.
Yeah,
we
revealed everything. It's pretty obvious that what's going to happen because it's called American Murder, Gabby Petito. So you know she's going to end up dead, and he's the only one with her. And anyway, but yeah, I wouldn't watch it if your nerves are not up to it.
Definitely trigger warning if you're going to watch it.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we've been watching. Just like always, we'll be diving deep. Fair warning, here there be spoilers. And now our review of Some Like It Hot.
I have to say, I was struck by the credits. Marilyn Monroe gets first billing. I mean, there's something
I didn't even notice that.
You watch these films, and there's, because I think of it as, this is a film with, it's a very iconic Marilyn Monroe movie. You also have Jack Lemmon, who, is like a 2-time Oscar winner, nominated a bunch of other times. He is third in the billing. He's the only member of the cast at that point who had won. Actually, I think he's the only member, period, who's ever won an Oscar. And yet he is third billing. And that's like, wow. Because nowadays it's like, you win an Oscar and you're like just plastered up there as, first billing, or they stick you at the end and stick a big and on there. But no, it's Marilyn Monroe, because that's what was going to put, butts in seats. And then it was Tony Curtis. And then it was, and Jacqueline. The afterthought.
That's the only one I knew going into this. Well, of course, Marilyn Monroe, but I forgot she was in it. But.
Yeah. So I like how the way it introduces you to this world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's two separate things that do it. The first is you have the opening scene of the hearse, and you see all these grim-faced men, and there's the police car, you get the chase and the shootout, and you're kind of wondering what's going on, and with the exchange of gunfire. And I have to say, I love the fact that when you see the police car spinning out, those weren't dummies attached. Those were stuntmen.
It's insane.
Yeah, it is.
That whole car chase was just amazing for the time.
Yeah.
And I hadn't realized that it was made in 59, because I was thinking, it's a period piece. Like it was made in the 20s or whenever it's set. Mm-hmm. And, but even for the 60s, like not even the 60s yet.
The 50s.
It's
the
50s. Like you said, the cars spinning out and all the stuff with the chase is just
you can tell the
really
film's
good.
A little speeded up, but not by a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see those stuntmen; they're holding on. So, and then and then you, after the hearse ditches the cops, you have the coffin bleeding alcohol, and then you learn it's Chicago, 1929. I just love that you're just kind of thrust in this world, and then you see the booze. Oh yeah, Prohibition.
Yes, I agree. I did write that too.
And I think that's a good time to point out that Billy Wilder was the writer and director of this movie.
Co-writer. I.A.L. Diamond.
That's right. Yeah. But there's several classics he made. Like he was the guy back in the day, and even directing. Like, yeah.
Can you name some of the?
So, The Apartment.
Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard.
He did the remake of The Front Page. It's interesting. He had this great reputation for doing these very witty, fast-paced films. He started as a writer, then did directing, and I got introduced to him through none of that because I learned about him. He in his later years, he did this series of interviews with Cameron Crowe, and it's this book called Conversations with Wilder, and Crowe did it. I think it was after Jerry Maguire and before Almost Famous, and he just started interviewing this because he was such a huge fan of Wilder's, and he just went into all the films, and he had this fantastic idea for a film that he never made it would have been his last film, about how these people in the 20s, they're doing this biblical epic, and they're playing these characters, and they're like. Their personalities are different from the characters they're playing in this epic, but as they're filming it, their personalities start to change based upon the characters they're playing. I thought that was such a neat idea. But because The Front Page, which was a remake, flopped, and I don't think he ever really did much after that. And that was back in the 1970s. He had like a 30-year arc.
There's also there's a Harrison Ford remake of. What is it called?
Sabrina?
Yeah, Sabrina. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might have heard of that one.
So, which was with Humphrey Bogart and Audrey Hepburn. Then you get what to me is one of the best jokes of the movie, which is the idea that the Chicago police would actually be serious about raiding a speakeasy. And maybe that's just the influence of Brian De Palma's The Untouchables, where the cops were all on the take and everyone knew where the booze was. But you had this, them lining up to do this, to raid this speakeasy, which is disguised as a funeral parlor, which of course is why these men were.
They get a lot of good double entendre jokes out of that.
Yes, they do. Yeah. And you have this great setup, and it's interesting that the main antagonist is, that's Spats Columbo, is George Raft, who was this really interesting. By the way, a CCC Criss Cross alum. He was in Ocean's 11.
Okay.
And he was in Hollywood in like the 30s and 40s, and he was associated with gangsters. Mm-hmm. And the idea of him playing a gangster wasn't really a stretch for him acting-wise, I don't think. But you get that he has that great banter with Pat O'Brien when the who plays the prohibition agent, and when O'Brien's when Mulligan's doing the bust, and he's trying to catch Columbo, and Columbo's like, never heard of him. Who ratted me out? Was it Toothpick Charlie? I never heard of him. They get right back and forth. That was nicely done. But of course, before we get the bust, we get introduced to our protagonists.
There's this amazing shot where I can't remember what the shot is doing before this. Probably just swooping around the ballroom and then, or the speakeasy, I guess. And then it swoops up to these guys in the band just playing in the back. Mm-hmm. And it seems like up to this point, it doesn't seem like there's going to be your protagonist. But from here on, you have this really long shot of them talking, and you get their whole deal. But. Yeah, no,
I've said, I've watched this movie before, and it wasn't until now, watching it and analyzing it, that I realized why they started to put away their instruments.
I loved that moment.
Yeah.
How they're sitting there, they're doing their banter back and forth. And I so love the way they set up the characters. Mm-hmm. That you get Joe, who's the gambler, he's the ladies' man, he's the person who's really pushing the boundaries and getting him in scrapes. And you have Jerry, who's the more cautious, the more milquetoast guy. And it was just so great.
Very much a Jack Lemmon character.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they weren't exactly, stretching themselves in terms of these performances. Mm-hmm. And then you get that great scene where, Levin sees Mulligan preparing a cigar using his prohibition badge.
Yep.
And it's like they just look at each other, start putting away the instruments. This is not their first time.
They're like, oh, well,
okay, gotcha.
Let's go.
And then you get the raid. My favorite line in the exchange between Columbo and Mulligan is when Mulligan says to Columbo, "You're going to need your lawyers," and Columbo points at his thugs, and he says, "These are my lawyers, all Harvard men." These guys have never even been in Massachusetts, much less Harvard. And they but it's just you get the impression that if you didn't know who Diamond and Wilder was, you would have assumed that line was written by someone who went to Yale. So, but that's just an example of how well written this movie is.
Yeah.
So
there's so much cleverness in it.
There is.
That's what Billy Wilder is known for. Like that's, If you want to get a taste of what his dialogue is and stuff, this movie is filled with it. So
it goes back to I think why Cameron Crowe admires him so much is because he's a writer's director, and directors who appreciate writing appreciate him for it.
I see.
He's got that great patter, but he also does that great action where the two men are. Where you get Joe and Jerry, they're escaping the building, they don't get busted. But now they're in their scrape. And I love the scene where they go to the various agencies. And it's just like one after another, door open, any jobs, nope, clam. Any jobs, nope, clam. So, and then you get them talking to that one agent who's looking for a bassist and a saxophonist. And of course, Jerry's the bassist and Joe's a tenor saxophonist. Exactly what they need. But for one slight problem, which is that
they have to be women.
Yes. So, and this is one of the things that, and I know Criss Cross is still far off, but it's one of the things that really distinguishes this film from Tootsie, which is the fact that that what these two men do, they're filling a void that cannot be filled by anybody else. This age, and he's calling around, I need. And he doesn't just need a female bassist and a female saxophone player. He's blondes, because just the entire band is blonde.
Oh yeah.
So he's calling around, and of course, and this is where you get to how, and this to me is the cleverness of Wilde as a writer. He doesn't pigeonhole characters, because it's Jerry who gets the idea, hey, why don't we dress up as women and do this?
Yeah.
And it's a dynamic I think you see later in the movie, which is that Jerry will sometimes have these flights of fancy, and Joe has to be the sensible one and kind of rein him in. And so you have Jerry talking about how he wants this job because it's 3 weeks in Florida, big pay. Well, and Joe's like, no, we can't do this. We're going to have to take this job in Urbana. Well, Urbana's 100 miles from Chicago, so they're going to need a car. And, this is where Joe turns on the charm. So he talks the secretary, gets her to give up her car. And wouldn't you know it, her car is at a garage where Toothpick Charlie and his mob is there.
Yeah.
So
Very happy coincidence there.
yeah. Well, not so happy for them.
Yeah.
Although without that coincidence, we wouldn't have the movie.
Exactly.
And I love one of the lines in there is he's like, now I got a bunch of coffins on my hands, and I don't want to let them go to waste. Yeah.
I think there was a line at the beginning where Toothpick Charlie was talking to the officer or whatever. He's like, if I don't know, the mob guy finds out, it's goodbye Charlie for me. And then it kept repeating, and then finally he said goodbye Charlie. Obviously it gave away that ending, but
Yeah. That is I missed that. I missed that connection there.
Yeah, it's just layered with clever things. You could watch it a million times and probably not pick up all the witticisms.
But they get gunned down. The garage attendant gets gunned down. They see Jerry and Joe, but Jerry and Joe were able to get away before they get shot up. And now they're on the run, and they've got to go somewhere, and Chicago's just too hot for them. And guess what? Now they have no other choice but to dress up as women and pose as women in this band, and get out of the state.
Yeah.
And I like how they do the reveal, which is the heels, the stumbling of the heels, pan up to them dressing up as the women.
yes.
And they're doing that. This is where you have to have this suspension of disbelief, because maybe it's just because I've been staring at Lemon and Curtis for the past 10-15 minutes. They just don't really authentically look like women, but nobody questions their disguises. I mean, heck, the millionaire who falls for Lemon, he never questions it. He's like, literally face to face. So, but I love how they're about to, give, or it's I think it's Lemon who's about to give up. He's like, Jerry's like, I can't do this. This is too much. And then who walks into the scene but Sugar Cane, Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
And the scene where she gets blasted by the steam from the engine? That's supposed to be a callback to
the sewer grate.
Yeah, from 7 Year Itch. Yeah.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that. Yeah.
I haven't seen that movie either, but that's an iconic scene. And then Jack Lemmon is about to give up, and the newspaper boy comes through and he's like, extra bloody aftermath. He's like, well, you convinced me. And then they get on the train.
Yeah, the reminder. It's sort of like the push, the pull. The push being the Spats Columbus hunting for them, and then the pull of whoa, there's Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
For me, there will be a reference later with Tootsie, but they compare like, oh, it's so dafty. Like, how do these girls wear these dresses? Like, aren't they cold? This is why they're cold all the time. I thought that was very. I've seen that episode or that scene before, but it's just kind of funny that, like, of course, men would say that.
I think it gets to how in the 1950s the idea of men dressing up as women was more unorthodox, and you didn't have the jokes that you have more often nowadays about kilts and so forth, even though, kilts were obviously around back then.
That's true.
So it is more of like, hey, this is weird. How do women get away with this? So, and then you get on the train. They tend to blend in fairly well. Again, none of the ladies really recommends them, but I like how they start with Jerry really being drawn to sugarcane. Mm-hmm. That is Jack, because it's so unlike him, and yet he was an amazing actor, as was Curtis, as was Monroe, and the way that you totally can see how he sees Marilyn Monroe and he's like, wow, and he forgets his inhibitions. He's the one that's going crazy. Joe, you get the impression with his experience, he's able to restrain himself a little bit. Mm-hmm. And he's able to say, no, Jerry, pull it in a bit.
And he has to remind him, you're a girl. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm a girl.
I forgot about that.
There's going to be a great payoff for that later on.
Yeah. But then you also see some things where they're having to think on their feet because they're having to answer for things like, why does Jerry's base have holes in it from when they were being shot at?
Which is also going to have a great payoff.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have where Sugarcane is, she's on thin ice. She's the singer. She also plays ukulele. Do you know why, by the way, that they had her character play ukulele? Mm-mm. Supposedly, it was because it accentuated her chest to have her playing like that, which gets to the fact that they weren't respecting Monroe's acting skills. Mm-hmm. She was there as eye candy. And this gets to this really problematic status that Marilyn Monroe had, which I think contributed to a lot of her problems, which she brought onto the set. She apparently was having substance abuse issues and struggling.
I think that's what I read one time about that. Yeah.
And how they really struggled. Apparently there was one line where it was just like 3 words and she kept muffing the order of the words. It was just I think you can, and granted it's the benefit of hindsight, you can see how she was having all those problems that were ultimately going to plague her going forward. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can see a lot of the early signs of it there, but she's amazing in this role. Mm-hmm. And she does that thing where she talks about how she feels dumb because she's, made all these, bad judgments. She talks about how she, always keeps falling for the tenor sax players. There's something about how they play the music. It just causes her to...
And that ups the stakes for the when she says she's got a thing for tenor sax players, he starts taking interest in her. Yeah. And then there's the back and forth thing of Jack Lemmon's character's got to pull him away. Yeah. And that's what the whole dynamic of this is built out of. It's a suspense setup of they can't let slip that they're men.
Although, and I think this is, again, part of Wilder's thing is that the reversals are very gradual because Jerry is still pursuing Sugar well into their time in Florida.
Yeah.
It's around the time that he gets passed off to Joey Brown's character when Tony Curtis decides he's going to pose as, and I still love the name, Shell Oil. and he does the bad Cagney, or not Cagney, bad Cary Grant. And it's when Jerry decides he's going to go off, and I'm trying to remember the actor's name. I got to hear my notes. Or the character's name.
Oh, Jerry, the cello player? Is Daphne.
No. Osgood Fielding the Third.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
When he decides that he is going to go off with Osgood Fielding the Third, and they go down, that's when he sort of concedes the match to his friend.
Exactly, yeah.
But up until that point, there is a bit of a competition going on, where initially it's Jerry and Joe's running him, and then Joe's beginning to appreciate who that Sugar Cane. Yeah, he gets the impression that this is almost a woman who this is his destiny. Because she's intrinsically drawn to tenor sax players, but of course doesn't work with him because he's not a he, he's a she. Mm-hmm. He's Josephine, not Joe. So she can just share all this information with him, and he's thinking,
Yes, and then he spends the time trying to make up the character, not be him, the saxophone player.
But you also have Jerry who's pursuing her, and you get that with when she goes to his bunk, and he's trying to, he's has this opportunity. He's hoping to make something of it, but then of course it spirals out of control, and it's a huge party. This is, it's kind of funny how I can suspend my disbelief for the fact that they don't really, the two, Joe and Jerry don't really look like women, but having all those women in Jerry's bunk and not discovering his, shall we say, extra plumbing is where...
Oh, okay.
Because they're like literally crawling all over him. He's and it's great physical comedy because Jack Lemmon, he has the great facial gestures for it, but it's still like, you mean none of them stumbled across it? I was kind of hoping maybe there's a subplot where one of the women, I know your secret type of thing, but no, you didn't get that. Instead, it's...
I thought you were going to say that, because this is what I was going to point out, of that bunk was so small, but then you see it from the other side when all the women start coming in. It's freaking huge.
It has a clown car quality because when the train stops, they all come spilling out.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was cute though, but for the comedic relief, or not comedic relief, but it's just when all the girls fall out and then they're all running to their little cart bedrooms, and then all of a sudden the director comes out. I'm just like, what happened?
Yeah, the band leader, Sweet Sue.
Yes. I thought it was cute.
It was very cute. It is a very cute movie. Which is interesting because you have a scene of mass murder in it.
Oh, true.
And you don't even, it doesn't seem jarring at all. So, but they get to Florida, and it's so great seeing them coming off the bus and all these millionaires on the front porch. They're all craning in unison and all nodding in unison, and that's when Osgood encounters Daphne for the first time and comments on how drawn he is to, was it her ankles or her calves? I can't remember which.
I think it was her ankles.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because she was scandalously wearing a dress that was to the knee, so he could see them.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe Brown, I like. He's like Pat O'Brien and George Raft. He's one of these Hollywood vets. He's been doing films for practically since the silent era, and here he is. He just is so effortless in this role, does such a great job with it. You could see him sort of being so dazzled that he misses all the signs and so sells them. And of course, this matters when you get to that that famous last line in the movie.
Don't give it away yet.
I'm not going to spoil the ending for the summary. So, but now we have and of course the idea is that they're playing at this resort for the wealthy that are hanging out there, but of course they have time to relax once they get there, and so this is when Joe decides he's going to try to seduce Sugar Cane by being the man that he knows she's on the hunt for.
Yeah.
She's
already told him all the qualifications that he needs, and now he just is playing that role.
Exactly.
And you saw how he set all that up. How he took Mr. Beanstalk's suitcase, Mr. Beanstalk's glasses.
Yes.
And that's where he comes up with this outfit and the disguise that she can't see through, and he puts on.
Yeah, and by the way, getting to the place in Florida is, I think, the midpoint, because there's a shift in the direction of where it's going, and it's kind of a refresh of. I thought like the whole movie was going to be on the train, and then once they got to Florida, they'd run into the gangsters and whatever. But at the midpoint they get to the place in Florida, and then the entire goal kind of shifts.
That's true. I didn't see it like that. Like where you think it's going to be solely about Josephine / Joe trying to get with Sugar. I see that. Honestly, as the story fell along, I was like really upset by Josephine's intentions with Sugar. It actually now I'm like,
well, he's got the arc in the movie that'll pay off later, and I'll point it out. So, but yeah, he's supposed to be the douche, and then later on, he has a bit of a change of heart.
Yeah. I guess maybe from a modern perspective, it's like, ew. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, there is. I mean, he's exploiting this false intimacy that he's created with her on the train. She has spilled secrets to him that she would not spill had she known he was a man. Yes. And he's exploiting that, as cads tend to do. He's got this insider knowledge. He's going to be. And it's interesting. We could talk about this Criss Cross. The contrast with when Michael, tries to do that with Jessica Lange's character.
Yes. Yeah.
I was about to point that out too. Like their two characters are very similar, and their arcs are very similar. So,
but here it's working in part because, Joe's trying to play the long game. And he's figuring he's going to start by, presenting himself and then setting the stage for it and creating the right circumstances for what will happen, later on down. And it is great how he exploits Osgood's courting of Daphne as part of his pose with because he's still a broke sax player. So how is he going to pose as a millionaire? Well, the answer is he's stealing from all these better off men. It's great.
And then we get the comedic thing of, are we there yet? Them going on the boat and the
whole thing about the boat having how he manages to Shanghai Osgood's boat. Osgood has this whole dinner on his yacht set up for him and Daphne, and Joe convinces Jerry to, why don't you go do something else with him, and I'll take over the dinner.
Yeah, so that's we keep cutting back and forth between him trying to pretend to be a millionaire on the boat, which is rife for comedy. He can't make the boat work, so they have to drive to it backwards. Yeah, and
he doesn't know his way around the boat, but he kind of fudges it.
And then we cut back to Jack Lemmon's character dancing with Osgood, and he's like, "You're leading again."
Oh no, go ahead. No, go ahead. Oh no, it's just now that it's apparent to me, this reminds me of, I don't know if you guys watch White Chicks. Have you guys seen that movie?
Yeah.
So. No, it's now I'm connecting the dots. I wonder if that was like a reference.
Well, so, okay, this is a good point to point out the structure of comedy. And it's usually this started with Shakespeare, like the mistaken identity. So that's in Mrs. Doubtfire, which we almost did. That's in Sister Act. It's in White Chicks. It's... basically most comedies run off that structure of they've got to pretend to be this person, or they're mistaken for this person, and they don't want to let up the act, and the entire second act of the movie is them keeping up that facade, and it's a suspense thing too. Like the suspense is, are they going to be found out? And the closer you get to that edge of they're going to be found out, oh, I'm found out, oh, no. And then it turns out to be, oh, no, they meant this thing. Or it's like, oh, okay. And that nervousness creates the humor.
And they have that, and I love how they do that in the lead up to Shell Oil taking Sugar to the yacht, which is... because they finish their performance, and Joe as Josephine rushes out of there, goes to their room, changes into his Shell Oil outfit. He's shimmying down the pillar to get on a bike, and you have this great chasing, and you could see it because they don't even disguise it. He's still wearing the earrings.
Oh yes, yeah.
And there's that whole sense of he's going to get caught. He's going to get caught. This is how he's going to get caught.
Yeah, and this is also a suspense thing of they're getting there faster than he is. And and it's like, oh no, they're going to get there before he's even there. Or like she's going to get to the boat before he's even at it, and the jig is up.
She takes the upper pier, he takes the lower pier, and she's able to get to the boat in time.
Yeah. I thought for sure at that part, like, he would still have the earrings on, but obviously he felt them.
It was like, as he's just adjusting, he's like, oh.
Must have been clip-ons.
It had to have been clip-ons. He didn't have time to get his ears pierced.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. So, I also think one of the better comedic moments is the whole seduction scene, because they structure it in a way to where sugar is seducing Shell Oil.
Yeah.
And it just works. For me, it works on so many levels. I love the idea that how Joe is trying to play down this natural attraction that he has, trying to pretend that's just not working for him. So she's making this huge effort. He is, and then I'm thinking here, you have someone who is literally Marilyn Monroe having to make this extraordinary effort to seduce this man, and there's this comedic genius. And then I'm also thinking, that must have been incredibly difficult for Tony Curtis to act. Here he is. He has to play this. Just like,
no, doesn't do anything for me.
I mean, he's with the bona fide bombshell of the 1950s in all her gorgeous glory, and he's supposed to remember his lines.
Yeah.
Oh man, that scene did make me cringe though a bit. I was like, oh, I can't watch this. I mean, I watched it, but it was definitely like not my thing to watch.
but I think the setup is what makes it tolerable, if you will, because he's not forcing himself upon her.
Yeah.
He's and yes, he's tricking her, he's deceiving her.
Yeah.
But it is nonetheless where her attraction to him is genuine. Even if he's not genuine.
I think that was the point. That was like the playing coy with her that I didn't like. And that's why I was like, ew.
It does remind me of the sort of thing you see nowadays on the scene, the dating scene of men who like to, nag women and play that game to make the women want them. It is an antecedent of that. And you're right, that in that light it is rather disgusting. But you think about the alternative, how that scene could have been written. It's difficult to imagine how else might they've written it to where it would have been less objectionable, and you just can't think of it. It kind of gets to the whole problematic nature of it.
Yeah, but I do like how you explained how with Marilyn.
After all, it's like it's his arc. Like that's what he's supposed to be.
Yeah,
and then he'll change later on. But anyway.
The whole thing though comes at the cost of what you're of developing what you see between Daphne and Osgood, because I mean the dancing scene is really nice, and Lemon sells it like a pro, but I still don't feel like I quite grasped how he goes from, oh my god, this lecherous old man is wants to romance me, to,
we're getting married.
Exactly. Comes back and Joey's like, oh, it's going to be wonderful. And he gave me this bracelet. It's just, and it's like, what?
And then the reasoning he gives for it is money, basically. Like like, what are you getting from this? And he's like, security. And then he tells him, okay, I'm a boy. And he's like, oh, I'm a boy.
And again, you see that Jerry's kind of gotten ahead of himself and Joe has to rein him in.
Yeah.
So, but it still was, it was interesting to see how Jerry was being, in his own way, just as mercenary as Joe. It's just that whereas Joe was doing it to seduce.
He's being a gold digger.
Yeah, he's being a gold digger with Osgood. He's going to reveal after the wedding, and figuring that the scandal will do it. So, which in retrospect turns out to be a little optimistic on his part, but we'll get there.
Yeah, we will get there.
So, Is this the point where the Italian opera lovers
Yes.
society
I think
shows
so,
up?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to point out here that, like I pointed out, Sister Act is one of the similarities to that structure. This movie feels almost exactly like Sister Act, because and I wouldn't be surprised if Sister Act stole the structure from this movie. Of the beginning of Sister Act, she witnesses his boyfriend killing killing a guy in his office, and basically the beginning of this one is the same thing. They witness a bunch of gangsters get killed, and then in the third act the bad guy comes back, and that's what's happening here. So,
and here's where you get sort of the strained probability of how they happen to choose the one resort in all of America where these two are hiding out. That is where I appreciate the joke behind it, which is they do play upon the idea that who knows where they could be, and it turns out they're like riding up in the elevator and everything, and hey, don't I know you?
And this is an example of the Pixar rule of you don't want to have any coincidences in favor of your characters, but coincidences that are against them, you can do those as much as you want. Like, so the fact that they're having their conference here at this hotel, it's like, they're the bad guys, so they're allowed to have coincidences on their side. But
I also like how ultimately Joe and Jerry out themselves, not because they get found out, but because they panic, and it's as they're trying to escape, and they happen to land right in front of the room where Spats and his men are staying. And there's like, hey, those are the dames from the elevator. Wait, those aren't dames. Those are the two we're looking for. Literally falling into their laps.
yeah, and is this the part where they see the bullet holes in the?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great setup, because you don't think that's going to come back later. You just think, look, there's bullet holes in the base.
You think that the joke's been already delivered in the scene in the railroad car where they're performing, and the band leader's like, what about those holes? And it's actually kind of the response that Daphne gives is not a great response. So it's kind of like, I guess. Not everything that comes out of Wilder's pen is gold, but turns out he's saving it for the scene later on. So.
Great setup and payoff.
So then you get the chase scene through the hotel.
There's a scene early on when they first see them in the hotel, and they go into the elevator to get away, and then they all file in, and it reminds me of it's a classic suspense setup of they do it in The Fugitive, and they use it for comedy in this one.
Now it's like there's a lot of those moments where they were chasing after them, where they would appear, and then all of the guys were chasing them, and then they would all go into a different hallway, and then the guys chasing them would appear, but they wouldn't appear. I don't know if that's what you're referencing to, but I get what you're saying. Like, that was all comedic, at least for cinematic reasons. I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah.
I think that we skipped over something, which is that as they're preparing to go, Joe calls Sugar to break it off. He's posing as Shell, and that's when he...
Yeah, using the voice over the phone.
Yeah.
While he's in
and
Girl, Get Up.
And then taking the orchids that Osgood gave Jerry, sticking the bracelet in there and kicking it across to the door there. So he's giving that. And I like how after they'd gotten back, Sugar went to Josephine's room to talk about how she was in love. She didn't need alcohol anymore. She was riding high on life. And after she gets the call from Shell, she goes and she starts, where's the bourbon? She's heartbroken. She's devastated by this. And you see that during the chase scene when Josephine and Daphne, or Joe and Jerry at this point, because their identity's out, they run past and they see Sugar singing the song, which is basically, love is dead.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the end of his arc right here. He hears her singing this song and realizes the heartbreak and what he did basically, and what he says to her at the end of this song is, "Don't cry, sugar. No guy's worth it." And then he
kisses her, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but anyway, that's like that. That's his deal. Like he has a change of heart. He's not the ladies' man trying to woo her this whole time. Love him and leave him. Like he's telling her what she needs to hear from him.
I think prior to that, I think that's maybe why I had a little issue with it, because right before minutes of that, like where he notices that, I think it was him. He says, "You can't make an omelet without breaking an egg." And I was like, ew, like you're chasing this woman and you're just about to break up with her like that. And then, like you said, this is where it changes for him up until that moment when he realizes that she genuinely loves him. And that was probably the part where I was like, but but I'm glad it changed for them in the movie. I did wanted to say that I love the close-up shots of Marilyn. I think that was always like the money shots.
I think they understood that people were not going to go to theaters to see close-up shots of Jack Lemmon as Daphne.
Yeah, it's kind of the Dorothy and the other one.
Yeah.
It's like, back the camera up.
not too close. That was so funny.
Yeah.
There is one detail we did forget, though, which is that when Joe comes across Sugar singing in the bar, that's after Spatz and his gang have all been killed. So we actually get 2 mass murders in this movie.
Yeah.
Because when Joe and Jerry running, they run into the banquet, they're hiding underneath the table.
Yeah, and just suspense of them hiding under the table.
And of course, what I like is how that shooting simultaneously solves their problem, because now Spatz and his men aren't hunting for Joe and Jerry anymore. But now there's another group of gangsters which are like, hey, we can't have witnesses. Let's
out of the frying pan into the fire. It's basically the same thing as the beginning of the movie.
They just transferred one from one group of gangsters.
They should have just stayed under the table till they were done eating, and then we'll wait for him to leave the room. And it's like, okay, now we go.
Yeah.
Yes, I do agree about that part.
But you get, and then you have. Joe encountering Sugar, realizing he loves her, professing a love. They go running off. I can't remember how Osgood gets in the mix, but they're all running off to Osgood's boat.
Oh yeah, yes,
yeah.
Being chased by the gangsters, and they ride off, and Joe reveals that he's not Josephine and to Sugar, and she goes him and kisses him, and Daphne's trying to convince Osgood why it'll never work, and he keeps coming with all these explanations, and finally you get the big reveal, and then you get that famous last line.
Like, and he takes off his wig, and he's like, you don't understand, I'm a man. And then he's like, well, nobody's perfect. Without even looking over.
And have you read the story behind that line?
No, I haven't.
That line was a placeholder.
Oh, okay.
Wilder could not think of what to end it with, so he threw that in there, and he never came up with anything better. And now that is regarded as one of the funniest lines in the history of American cinema.
That's why Wilder's a good writer.
Yeah, Wilder's a great
Even
writer.
his placeholder stuff is great.
Yeah. So.
The reason that line lands so well, by the way, is just because that's been the main tension of the entire movie. Riding on them trying to keep this secret from these guys. And then he just gives it up all in 1 second, and it releases that tension. And the way Hitchcock knew, like, releasing the suspense through a joke it makes the joke that much funnier. So and I guess Wilder didn't recognize that it did that, and that's what he had riding on his joke, and that's why it worked so well. That release valve in just one moment of, I'm a man. Well, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I think it's really interesting how you can read that, and I can see how they get away with it in 1959, because the implication is that Osgood is just a little crazy.
Kooky, yeah.
So, or excuse me, he's rich. He's eccentric.
Eccentric, yes. So that is our review of Some Like It Hot. Now our review of Tootsie.
I feel like it's interesting how you get the opening, and the opening is about introducing you as the viewer to Michael Dorsey, Dustin Hoffman's character. Yeah. And as I'm watching it, though, I'm thinking to myself, I don't think Dustin Hoffman really had to stretch to play this guy.
Yeah, no.
This to me is like,
just
I watch
actor playing an actor.
Yeah, well, not just that, but I feel like the actor he's playing is who Dustin Hoffman is as an actor. This is what Dustin Hoffman would have been had it not been for a few lucky breaks. Mm-hmm. You know, not getting The Graduate, not getting some of his other films, because he plays this guy who, much like Dustin Hoffman, he's this intense perfectionist who...
kind of a jerk too.
Yeah. And of course, when you're a celebrity like Dustin Hoffman, you get away with it. I mean, you get jobs even after you manhandle Meryl Streep.
Yeah, I was going to reference that. What movie was it? Kramer versus Kramer. Yeah.
Which was 3 years before this. So, but Michael is, because he's
Yeah, for those who don't know, he's like, didn't he slap Meryl Streep before a take to just I don't know if it was like for her benefit, or I don't know what he was doing.
He may have thought he was doing her a favor. Yeah, Dustin Hoffman is very famous for being method and feeling like it has to be real. He can't do what Laurence Olivier once suggested, which is, why don't you try acting, dear boy? Yeah. That's not stuff. But you get the impression. I like how they present it. He does have that respect. He has friends. People like what he does, but because of his reputation, he just cannot get work. Mm-hmm. And you get a sense. Dustin Hoffman does a great job of conveying that frustration with it. Yeah, he so loves this craft. It's his lifeblood. It's his soul, and because he is too passionate about it, nobody wants him. Mm-hmm.
I see that. Yeah, definitely the opening was very personable, especially if you are an actor.
Yeah.
All of that was very funny.
A little too real.
A little too real. I did like her where they were introducing him, and then they were all talking about, Michael Dorsey reminding us about acting. Unemployment in acting.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what you have unemployment insurance for. It's 90% of your pay. Yes, suffer for your art. Yes, I'm going to go and be a waiter and do the grind because for him it is art, and he is an artiste.
I liked during his audition montage, they're like, we're looking for somebody different, and he's like, I can act different. I can be different.
No, I said we need somebody shorter. Oh, I can be shorter too.
I can be shorter. I'll take off my lifts.
You know who the voice was of the casting director in all those scenes? Mm-mm. It was Cindy Pollock.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, that's what which is interesting because he plays the agent.
Well. Yeah. So. There supposedly was some tension between the two on the set, and I can't help but think Sidney Pollock may have enjoyed playing the acting director rejecting Dustin Hoffman at scene after scene.
Okay, let's do another take. I don't think we've got it yet.
Yeah. But he also plays his agent. You have that great confrontation, and where he's trying to explain that, which I'm sure this has been the bane of so many agents' existence, that you're my client, and I can't find work for you because of who you are. and so because of his reputation, he's unemployable, and so then he. And the leap I didn't quite get, which is why he decides to dress up as Dorothy Michaels and try for this particular role. I mean, I get that he's already introduced to it because his Sandy is trying out for this Terry Garr's character, and it's a kind of horrible experience where he gets her all psyched up and really trying to overcome her own doubts and her own limitations as an actor. And she goes in, and 5 seconds later she's coming out, and she's already been rejected. But why does the leap? I felt like it wasn't really sold. It's kind of like seeing it's the agent saying Sidney Pollack saying nobody will employ you. You're just so difficult. Smash cut 2. He's already full drag, wig, glasses, all that stuff.
For me, I really did enjoy when Sandy, he's trying to help Sandy out by the auditions, and then she finally goes in, and like you said, she's already automatically booed out. Mm-hmm. To me, I thought kind of that neutrality that as actors, both men and women can have the same effect of being rejected. And so I think I could see how that, after he tried all these male characters and it didn't work out for him, it seemed like, okay, well, let me just go to the female route and see if it works for me that way. At least that's how I interpreted it as. It seemed, because at that point I thought it was oh, okay, some neutrality between those.
And yet you could also tell how his passion blinds him to how to still, because they don't really make as much of this as they could have at the end, but he is showing up Sandy, who is the most poorly served character in this movie. Yeah. What he does to her throughout this movie is just unrelentingly cruel. Yeah. And it just kills me, the fact that Terry Garr's character is so underwritten, and she does, I think, what she can with it. Mm-hmm. But it's the fact that all these terrible things happen to her because of him. Mm-hmm. All these terrible things he does to her, and yet at the end they end up being in a play together. I mean, I don't get.
Yeah. Well, she's there to show what he's like to women. And I mean, he's got that same arc that the other guy has, and from Some Like It Hot. But
I need that scene where he
realizes what he's done,
and then he makes it up to her.
Yeah,
because it's you go from, because the last thing we see is the big reveal, and she is understandably
shocked.
Yeah, gobsmacked. Like, oh my. And she screams, especially given that she spends so much time criticizing Dorothy in the role that she aspired to. But the very fact that he goes and auditions for a role that she was rejected from. Yeah. So either you're going there to demonstrate that nobody could get it, or because the alternative is she gets it, Dorothy gets it, and all of a sudden he's in effect stolen a role from Sandy. Mm-hmm. His friend.
Which, by the way, I just really liked I begged you to get some therapy.
Yeah. Oh, when he goes and reveals to his agent that he's done this. Yes. That was awesome. I ought to say, and one of the things I like about that is that they underplay the gay panic, because that was such a thing in movies at this time. And I mean, you see it the next year with with films like Police Academy, which comes to mind because George Gaines is both of them, and you get a bit of that at the very of the gay panic at the very end with the scene with Durning and Hoffman in the bar. But for the most part, it's just more the sense that that Pollack's character has, that his client has gone over the bend. He is now certifiably insane, dressing up as a woman, and in this very famous place, Russian Tea Room. He's dealing with this the biggest Broadway producer, and he's got crazy nutso next to him pretending to be a woman. And he's like, I got a rep to worry about. Please stop doing this.
Yeah.
But you could also tell that Michael's enjoying that greatly, that discomfort and that what that says about their relationship. So
Yeah.
Agreed.
But I also think it's interesting that you have Michael as Dorothy going in, and he is rejected 5 seconds in by Dabney Coleman's character.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And who I think this is when he's being typecast as sort of the misogynistic sleazeball, which he gets a lot of mileage out of that. This is before he does that. He goes on to do it in Buffalo Bill. He basically, it's like he gets typecast as the character he plays in 9 to 5. As I can't remember the famous line that he says in the movie about the kind of person he is, and but he rejects her out of hand, and then Dorothy does the monologue to him, and it's and this I think is the great direction. He focuses upon the face of the women. They're all like, "Wow, this is great," and this of course is where we get to my big issue of the movie, which I'll get back to in a little bit. But how it is the female producer who goes to the elevator and pulls them in. It's like it's the women who are the ones who are responding positively to what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's such an important plot point that this is a soap opera, which in the 1980s was very much seen as women's TV. This was they apply throughout that men are watching it too, but it's predominantly a genre for women, and so it's in effect his career gets saved not just by playing a woman, but by women who are responding positively to him because of it.
In his first scene of actually filming the show, I think it's funny, they start it with, "I want her to be a little more attractive. Can you back off a little?" And he's like, "How about Portland?"
Oh, yeah.
Which implies more about how, the challenges he's having in pulling it off, which is that and this is something that Dabney Coleman's character talks about, which is that there's something, off about him. He can't quite figure it out, but he can just sense it. And of course, he attributes it to the fact that all women should be attracted to him because that's the kind of guy he is, and he doesn't get that vibe from Dorothy at all. So,
And then just to also compare, there was another comparison where the struggles of women, where Tootsie says like, "Oh, I feel like all these women, how did they do it? They're starving in order to buy things." It was very like, I wonder how much was it in the 80s?
One of the things I enjoyed about Hoffman's performance is how once he gets the job, he just throws himself, immerses himself in being a woman. He's buying the clothes. He's dwelling on this stuff.
Yeah, and then again with the agent, he's like, "You're psychotic," and he's like, "No, I'm employed."
Yes. I liked how Bill Murray was there kind of like as the, I don't know, like the conscience of the psycho-ness.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that